Now time to bring you our interview segment on the show today. Now the federal government still maintains there's no going back and removal of fuel subsidy, stating that in the last 14 years the sum of 10.4 trillion naira has been spent on the subsidy regime. It also says any form of subsidy that had been draining government coffers has now been stopped, including tariff on electricity, which also hit 1.7 trillion naira. Well, joining me via Skype to deliberate more on the recent increments and also the energy sector pricing model via Skype, I have the managing partner, Zenera consultant, Mecca Olowola. Good to have you on the show today.
Good to be here, David.
Now, it's been quite an interesting week. So many reactions have followed the recent hike in fuel price. At the end of the day, this is still following the price modulation mechanism, but the outcry is that as the fuel price increases or oil prices increase, it means Nigerians just have to pay more, which we cannot necessarily sustain for a long while to come. What's your thought on the recent development?
I think that the case has always been extant, and government should have done a lot more communicating over the issues. Another thing that I think they should have done differently would have been to fully liberalize the market instead of price modulation. When the announcements first came, in April, it should have been full liberalization. That we have, somewhat, right now. When you start to, talk about modulation, it still means that you have, significant form of regulation, and then, the nation couldn't take advantage of the fact that, international fuel oil prices were low at the time. So what we could have done differently was liberalize the market at the time where you had the lowest, oil prices, so the nation can enjoy low pump price of fuel. And then when it rises up, the same populace will be more forgiving, more understanding of the issues that are driving, the price. So what we have now is a situation where it is completely impossible for government not to liberalize the market as far as pump prices are concerned, and it's virtually impossible to sustain any form of subsidies, going forward.
Well, just like you've rightly mentioned, now at the end of the day, the federal government insists there's no going back on the removal of fuel subsidy, which has already hit about 10.4 trillion naira in the last couple of years, over a decade now. And now, looking at the pricing template we are adopting, the federal government also insists that we are looking at full deregulation of the oil and gas sector. From your own lens and interaction with other energy experts and stakeholders in the value chain, do you think government has a strong understanding of what a full deregulation means and what sort of mechanisms and infrastructure need to be put in place to be able to support this ideology, not to swing backwards?
I think that they do. It will be naive to say that the very intelligent people that we have, occupying government positions, at least the ones that were appointed, are not, fully abreast of the issues, right? I'm not talking about politicians now. I'm talking about the technocrats, But we have very knowledgeable people who are advising government. What, we don't seem to have is the communication structure that is required to onboard these sort of complex issues, right? And I don't think that we're talking full deregulation here, unfortunately, right? Because when you fully deregulate the petroleum downstream market, what you're going to have is complete removal of petroleum equalization fund, for example, right? If you deregulate the market, you can't have the same pump price of petrol that you have in Lagos as you would have in Kano, Maiduguri, or even Abuja. Do you understand? Because you're going to have to layer in the cost of transporting that product to those places, because the jetties are here, right, in the southwest and the south. So how is that possible if you say there's full deregulation, but yet there's a uniform pricing across the nation, right? So it's something that needed to have been done long before now. And if you notice, we've spoken about it, severally, from 2005, we've been having this discussion. And in the last 3 to 4 years, we've been to TVC to talk about these things over and over again, but the government doesn't just have the political will and strength and courage and tenacity to be able to take the sort of decisions that are needed. But right now, the country, the government is broke. It's almost impossible. There's nothing they can do, right, about it, which is where we are here now. So it's not a case of, is government willfully doing this? It's impossible, except you want the country to go broke, right? They can't afford the $8 billion, that you need to be able to subsidize petroleum products, period. And that's the truth, right? So there are so many dynamics. How is the common man going to benefit? What should have been done? Where should government should really be subsidizing? We should be talking about transportation as well, medical care. We should be talking about things like infrastructure. We should be talking about education. Do you understand? But I'm aware that in certain respect, government is doing a number of laudable things in those respects, but people don't know. Unfortunately, yeah.
Mecca, let's now talk about the price movement of oil at this point in time. As at this very hour we are discussing, we see Brent crude and then along the OPEC basket also drop down to about $39 a barrel. That's quite a surprise twist we've seen over the past few days. We initially saw the oil price rising as much as $45. It was with cautious optimism, all of the sentiments we've had so far, but now we are going back again. Now, at the end of the day, one of the issues that have been raised is the fact that how then do we yield to the forces of demand and supply and still also keep a sustainable pricing template?
So, first of all, Nigeria is overexposed to the vagaries of oil prices, unfortunately. So every time you have, those movements, you start to see a lot of crisis going on, in our own economy. So right now we have, what the economists call existential stagflation, which is high inflation or high unemployment and reduction in growth. So we have about over 30% in unemployment rate in the country, and we have underemployment at the same time. CBN has come to say that we've lost over 100 billion of debt and equity. We have 65% drop in commodity prices. So all of these things are creating pressures. Significant reduction in revenues coming to the Federation account, right? And then you layer in devaluation of the naira from restrictions or reduction in foreign currency inflows, and you have a very serious situation, right? Diversification is the word. That's what we should have done right from time. So the second best time to take a decision is now. That's always the case. You lost an opportunity before, don't lose it again, right? What are you doing for posterity? So if you look at the global economy, what the nations that are able to hedge against these vagaries of oil and dancing yo-yo are those who have strong local economies, who are producing their consumption, right? Not only in oil, but also when it comes to goods and services, right? So there are countries like Venezuela, like China, who have grown despite the challenges that you have. Not to talk about, developed countries that have grown despite these challenges. So the thing why we are overexposed is because we don't have a strong economy that is based on production. We have a consumption economy and we import almost everything. And so until we go back in time to strengthen, the fundamentals, we will still be exposed to oil prices. And because there's a lot of speculation, right? What are the issues coming from Russia? OPEC Plus is trying to put a cap on production. You are trying to, manage, oil prices internationally, and at the same time, the economies are starting to pick up, as restrictions are being lifted, right? So there are so many things happening at the same time that is making it very difficult to predict what the oil prices will be. And when you can't make reasonable forecasts, then you struggle with your own economic indicators.
Well noted, Mecca. Now, let's also look at the forecast we're expecting in terms of Dangote Refinery also coming into bear. At the end of the day, we've looked at our 4 refineries. We've had situations where they were not producing any oil at all. We've had situations where the dilapidated structures were just left to just while away the time. Now the new focus is on Dangote Refinery. But up until then, what sort of measures do you think we have to take at this point in time in the short term? And do you think our focus on just one refinery is good enough? What should be the plan of action?
So it's a lot of issues that you have raised. Do you understand? And the focus on one refinery is unhealthy, right? For obvious reasons.
But the capacity to bring is quite vast.
650,000, barrels a day. Yes, that's significant. But there's a human risk there. Do you understand? So if anything happens and the refinery doesn't come on stream on time as you planned, then what happens? So those are the issues. But it's not only Dangote that I'm aware that are doing interesting things, along those lines. I know of a company called Petrolex that is planning to bring on stream eventually about 250,000 barrels a day refining capacity. I know that the new vision for the Niger Delta that the federal government is pursuing is already ready to bring small modular refineries in the Niger Delta upstream. They're very small, but we are making the right steps in the right direction. But these things need to be better communicated. People need to be aware that those things are happening, but they are not, right? So those are the issues that are affecting us. We need to build our own refining capacity. We should have done that. The amount that we've spent on subsidies over the years should have given us more than enough refining capacity, right? Unfortunately, we've lost that opportunity. Now we shouldn't lose, the one, going forward, which is my point. We can sit down and say, what should be done? Continue to empower indigenous capacity in that regard, because it's very clear that the IOCs are not interested in helping us get over or circumvent the issues that plague us. They are not interested in that, right? Because given the amount of money that they made from this country, there's no reason why we don't have refineries coming from any of these big guys, right? But so we have to look inward. So Dangote, Petrolex, all these guys are in the right direction. Keep empowering them more. Do you understand? Be deliberate about the refining policy. Go back and find out what is happening and and come up with a structure that supports them. That's where CBN intervention should be going into. That's where we should focus on to say what are the risks that that you face as a company on the macroeconomic front, and that would help you to bring about whether it's regulatory forbearances, whether it's helping them with policies, whether it's helping them with licenses, whatever it is to fast track those things should be what we should be focusing on right now.
Okay, so Mecca, as we are wrapping up conversations at this point in time, what's your take? If we were to play pundit at this point in time, do you think we would see any sort of downward adjustment in terms of the oil price, the pump price? We'll see all the landing costs?
I think, a major component of the pricing template is, fuel prices, international oil prices, right?
Exactly.
Right. So when and we've started to see a bit of movement along those lines, but it takes time for it to translate to the landing price here, because the cost of oil prices today does not necessarily mean that I can adjust the pump price in the country today. Right? So, yes, the oil price has to go to a refinery. The refinery has to refine it. You have to then transport it. So it takes about an average of 3 months. Really, for you to see some of those things. So that's why when you say oil prices are moving and labor is saying why are things not happening, concurrently here. It's a bit of a complex scenario. But what I think would happen is that if you have a very good elastic market and you have a somewhat liberalized market, and there's perfect competition, you're going to find a situation where that will play out, and eventually things will settle in, and then you start to see, favorable pricing. The people are just a bit, so there are two main categories of people: the people who understand the issues but are unhappy, with the timing or with government generally, and the people who don't understand it. So everything is communication. You need to educate the people, let them understand it. People are just saying, "Oh, you've increased electricity now." Fuel prices are going up in a situation where there's unemployment, where there's pressure. And it's just unfortunate. Do you understand? I think that this regime, despite the things that how well-meaning they are, unfortunately, there have been so many.
It's quite a Herculean tax for government at this point in time.
Undesirable developments that are extraneous, to them, and making them unable, to be able to take to do the right things that seem favorable to the masses, So what the few things that they are doing very well and doing very strongly are things that should be on the ascendancy from a communications point of view.
Thank you very much for your contribution on the show today. Mecca Olowola, Managing Partner of Zenera Consultant. It's been a pleasure having you. And at the end of the day, we just hope that a whole lot of stakeholders' engagements are held just to be able to create some level of sustainable plans to be able to mitigate and then maneuver through all of these shocks we've had so far. The shocks will always come through. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, this is where we wrap up this edition of Business Week. Many thanks for watching so far. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm David Alabi.